It's behaviour that really is lower than low. Thankfully, though, in most workplaces around the country, men sexually harassing or assaulting their female colleagues is simply not tolerated. But in the mining industry, it seems that kind of unacceptable conduct is not at all out of the ordinary. It's the norm. Just as shameful, when the women complain to their bosses, they're often the ones who end up being fired. Now, everyone knows mining brings in billions of dollars to the Australian economy, but that's no excuse for men behaving badly. Like thousands of others, Astacia Stevens thought the West Australian mining boom would be a boon for her bank balance. She wasn't naive, though. She knew being a woman in a predominantly man's world would be challenging. What she didn't know was just how depraved her everyday work life would be, and what women were expected to do if they wanted to succeed. Give us a bit of insight into how it works.
So, majority of the time, the women are propositioned, if you want to get on the trucks, you need to get on your knees. And that's pretty much how it goes through everything. Once you're on the trucks, if you want to get on the water cut, you get on your knees. You want to get on the wheelie dozer, you get on your knees. You want to get onto the digger, you get on your knees. You either say yes or you say no. If you say no, you end up like me. You're a troublemaker. You're a pain in the ass. You know, you just don't get anywhere. And if you say yes, you do. You get the rewards.
And by get on your knees, you mean physically, literally?
Yes, literally, get on your knees. I've had bosses that have exposed themselves to me and told me, if you wanna, and just done the actions to be like, you know.
So it's explicit?
Yes, yep.
Astacia started as a fly-in, fly-out worker at remote mine sites in WA's Pilbara 12 years ago. She says at first life was good, but it wasn't long before everything changed and she became prey to her out-of-control superiors.
They use their power to try and get people like myself to do things that they, I don't even like saying it, to do those sort of sexual acts in order to get anywhere, which was, just disgusting.
You were talking about immediate supervisors?
Yes.
So people who can control whether or not you move up the ladder?
Yes. People who control whether or not I'm employed.
We're talking about a pattern here. We're not just talking about one or two people.
We're talking about a culture. This is a culture within mining.
Brent Stevens is Astacia's husband and a FIFO worker himself. Although he was based at different sites to his wife, he saw plenty of appalling behaviour among the men.
They don't see a young girl, they see fresh meat.
So you don't think it's a big secret in the mining industry?
Oh, definitely not. No, it's one of the first things you hear about. Yeah. It's, welcome to mining. Don't hurt yourself. This also happens.
I've had penises exposed to me, for crying out loud. Close proximity to you and I.
The sordid tales continue. Sasha Chambers has worked as a multi-equipment operator in the mines for 6 years. Remarkably, she says the objectification of women in mining goes way beyond anything she experienced in her previous job in adult entertainment.
I've never had penis exposure as an adult entertainment industry worker, let alone in any other industry. Why is mining any different?
Do you think the sexualised behaviour that you're talking about is any different? Is any worse on a mine site than it is in other industries?
Okay, I'll give you an exact example. When I was a stripper, we had power to look out after our bodies and to make sure that no one was allowed to touch it, right? We don't have power here. We don't have power in the mining sector. We go to speak up, we go to say something. There, that's it, see you later. Oh, where's your evidence? Where's the proof? Where are the witnesses? Witnesses won't come forward because they're too afraid. They don't want to speak up. So you're on your own.
That's a sad indictment, isn't it?
It's a reality.
Like Sasha, Astacia Stevens knows how futile it is to complain. In 2012, she was working as a contractor for Rio Tinto, but wanted to become a permanent employee. A company supervisor told her how it was possible as he unzipped his pants.
If you want a shirt, you know what you got to do.
If you want a shirt.
That's the term for getting transferred over from a contracting company to being employed with the mine site or the mining company directly.
And when you rejected his advances, what did he say?
He tried to laugh it off as a joke, zipped his pants back up, didn't say another word to me. And from there, he'd made my life a living hell.
Rejecting her boss was a bad career move. From that point, he began stalking Astacia, abusing her over the two-way radio, embarrassing her at staff meetings, and ordering her to perform unsafe work practices in order to get her dismissed. Her complaints about him went nowhere, and eventually he fired her. Worse still, when she applied for other jobs, she found she'd been blacklisted.
This particular hiring company said to me, it wouldn't happen to be this person that's responsible, is it? I said, yes, it is. And she's like, I am having girls that are not even lasting 24 hours on site because of his behaviour. And from there, she went to put me to another site and found out that I was actually blacklisted.
But hang on, so the company knew about the problem, about
Yes.
this particular person?
Yes,
But their answer was to move you from the site,
yes,
not him.
yes.
What did that tell you?
You don't have a hope in hell.
You're isolated from everything else. Some mine sites don't even have cell phone reception. Supervisors, management, they're all the higher power on site. So if you go to them with a problem and they've told you, no, that's not a problem. So where do you go from there? There's no police up on site. They're the authority.
No police made Brent very worried. He thought by speaking up, Astacia was making herself a target.
As a form of intimidation, I've known people to have large rocks, large loads dropped from height onto their truck just to ensure that they know that what they've shared has gotten out.
So you're suggesting there is room there for payback?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Now, if you think Astacia's experience is bad, she says she knows other workers who've suffered even worse treatment. Women who've been drugged and sexually assaulted, but have been too frightened to say anything.
I have seen women wake up on paths. I have seen women wake up behind dongers that can't remember anything. I have had women speak to me about waking up in their bed with no recollection of people sleeping with them, which at the end of the day, that's rape. And it happens so much more often than anyone realises.
Your reaction to this, I mean, you feel this really personally.
When you have and I'm not talking just one or two women, like I know so many that we have sat there and we've had discussions about the rape, the sexual assault, and how powerless we feel.
What sort of responses have you observed?
They don't know how to survive it. They don't know how to manage it. I just feel helpless at times because I can't give them some sort of solace. I can't give them sort of any hope at the moment. All I can give them is coping strategies in how to survive. It's just a hellhole. A hellhole. If you really, really open your eyes and look at the industry for what it is a hellhole for women.
Bronte Glass couldn't agree more. What happened to her at a WA mine last August is truly shocking.
There are predators within this industry.
It brings billions of dollars into our economy. But the mining industry in Australia is blighted by scandal. A culture of sexual harassment and abuse, where women who choose to work at remote mine sites are being treated like dirt.
You do put up with a lot of bullshit in this industry. You put up with a lot of stuff, you know.
Bronte Glass has been in the business for 22 years, much of it working as a truck driver at major mines in Western Australia. Last year, she was a contractor for Macca, a company that provides production staff to the Goldfields mine site 1,200 kilometres northeast of Perth. It was a job she loved until it all went wrong.
There are predators within this industry.
One day in August, Bronte had an allergic reaction to a meal on site and broke out in hives. She was given an antihistamine, but it didn't work. On the pretext of treating the hives, 2 mine staff members then came to her room and ordered her to take 5 tablets of a powerful sedative called diazepam. Bronte protested.
I said, I cannot take that medication because I'd had an allergic reaction in hospital.
But it was to no avail.
They've told me to take this medication, that I have to take it. I'm under instruction by the medical doctor. And I said, well, I need to speak to this doctor. And he goes, well, he's unavailable. He can't talk to you. I'm not leaving this room until you take this medication. So if I was you, I'd go and get some water.
Bronte says she was given multiple doses of diazepam throughout the day, but never saw a doctor. She remembers what happened next like snippets from a bad dream. 2 men came into her room and she believes attacked her.
What I remember is I was being assaulted and I could not move. I was catatonic and I was pushed up to the top of the bed. And what I remember is flashes going off, like someone was taking photos of this while this was happening, while I was being assaulted. And I just couldn't move.
That evening, one of Bronte's workmates found her drugged and incoherent, and the door to her room unlocked. From that point, events are unclear. But the next day, while she was still under the influence of the sedatives, Bronte was put in the back of a car, driven 6 hours to Kalgoorlie, and flown to Perth. She's still not actually sure why.
I went from having hives to being drugged and then raped in my room at camp. It didn't make sense. And then being driven off site, I cannot remember the drive. I don't even know who took me.
No one from Macca or Goldfields was in Perth to meet her. Alone, she found her car in the airport car park and somehow managed to make a 2-minute drive to a friend's house where she stayed because she was so out of it. After a few days, she noticed the bruises on her upper thighs. These are the photos she took at the time. I mean, how else do you explain those markings?
I can't explain it. I didn't hit myself. I mean, to have hand marks on both thighs and the outer thigh, definitely hand marks. Yeah.
But back at the Goldfields mine, a very different story was being told about what happened to Bronte and why she was removed from site. Rosanna was another Macca contractor who was there at the time. She knows that speaking out will make her a pariah in the industry, so we've concealed her identity. Can you remember what was the talk among the crew about her leaving or being taken off site?
They made it sound like she had some kind of emotional break and that she was locked in her room for days and days and wouldn't leave. And then finally they dragged her out of her room and drove her to the airport just to get her off site. Like, they couldn't even wait to the end of the swing. They just had to get rid of her as quick as they could.
That was news to Steve Kelly, who was the quarry manager for the Goldfields mine. He's since left the company, but even so, he's still concerned about the repercussions of talking publicly. So we've concealed his face. He was not on site the weekend Bronte was removed. Did you know anything about what happened to Bronte?
Not a thing. Not a thing until way after the event. I wasn't actually on site at the time. Irrespective of that, I should have been made aware of it when I came back to site. If there's an incident, then it needs to be reported straight away.
When you heard about it, were you angry?
I was angry, yeah. It's a diabolical issue. It's terrible. It's the most serious issue I've ever heard in my life.
What's the procedure for taking someone off-site, sending them home?
Normally the medic's got to be involved in that. There would be discussion with, obviously, the site leadership team. They should technically be notifying the principal that they're flying someone off-site for a reason. That being said, you don't just take them to an airport, put them on a plane and wave goodbye at the gate. There needs to be some follow-up, like what happens when they land, who's responsible for them once they land, because they're still an employee.
Duty of care.
Duty of care, yeah.
But Rosanna says there's more to the story. She observed that Bronte had fallen out of favour with her supervisor and workmates prior to her removal.
There were definitely inappropriate things and unfair things that happened to her, so she could have spoken out and reported some of the things that had happened to her. And I think management knew that and were working quickly to get her off site so that she couldn't do that.
Why do you say that? Why do you think she was treated unfairly?
She was made out to be the crazy girl, and she was labelled as difficult. So it was very much, they decided that Bronte's time was done there, and they made it very difficult for her to stay.
Bronte's room, a potential crime scene, had been cleaned within days of her being removed, and her belongings, including her bedding, was gone. So the police would have had to have moved very fast to get any evidence?
Yes.
It took 4 days for Bronte to get over the effects of the multiple doses of diazepam. And when she did, she went to police to report the sexual assault. But she says it took weeks for officers to even visit the site. However, 6 months on, after we contacted WA Police, they were very quick to call Bronte and reassure her that the investigation was progressing. Bronte also reported what happened to the WA Mines Inspector, the government body designed to investigate complaints based here in Perth. An investigator conducted his own inquiries and told Bronte he'd spoken to the 2 men allegedly involved in the assault.
He said to me that he had been interviewed everybody on site and that, those 2 guys, they're good guys.
They're good guys. That was his feedback to you.
Amongst other things, where he'd victim shamed me with the things he said to me. Why did I take the medication? Well, that was pretty silly. You shouldn't have done that. I'm under instruction, I believe, by a medical doctor who's stopping my itch. I didn't know that I was going to be assaulted.
A short time later, the mines inspector wrote to Bronte telling her he was closing the case.
The extensive evidence that I have gathered from site and other stakeholders has indicated there is no breach of applicable mines safety legislation by the site as a result of their actions or inaction.
Nobody's at fault here, even with the way they've driven me out of camp, that I said, well, where was their lack of duty of care? Like, I could have died. I could have just disappeared. Nobody would have even known.
When we called the Department of Mines, we got a very different story to the one they told Bronte. They said they couldn't possibly comment on her case because their investigation was ongoing, which is rather strange because they told Bronte last November it was all over.
I want the truth to come out.
You believe Bronte?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I believe Bronte.
Because of the way it's rolled out, Steve?
I think because of the level of secrecy that's gone on behind this, it just reeks to me of, all the way through.
And it appears that other complaints at the Goldfields mine site have gone under the radar. We've found out that just 2 months after Bronte's incident, Rosanna reported her own frightening experience on site.
I knew that if something had happened, I wouldn't be able to defend myself.
Bronte Glass says in August last year, she was sedated and then sexually assaulted by 2 men. Later, without explanation, she was taken from the Goldfields mine and flown to Perth. 2 months after that, her colleague Rosanna had her own confronting encounter. She was socialising with her workmates, but after having too much to drink, decided to head back to her room. A man whose advances she'd repeatedly rejected began stalking her in the dark.
I've turned around and he's following me back to my room. By that point, I realised how drunk I was, and I had a moment where I knew that if something had happened, I wouldn't be able to defend myself. So straight away I said to him, you need to leave me alone. And then I blacked out. So I don't know how long it was that I was out for, but the next thing I remember was being back in my room, sitting on the floor in front of my fridge, and there's 4 people in my room.
What, 4 men?
One of the guys I didn't know at all, and one of them was that man that was outside my room that I said, you need to stop following me. So they were all in my room going through my stuff.
Rosanna was so fearful, she locked herself in her bathroom for over an hour until the men left. The next day, she complained, and an investigation was launched by Macca, the contractor that runs the production on site. Curiously, there were no consequences for those who had entered Rosanna's room, and she did not receive a copy of the investigation report. Instead, she was given advice from her manager.
Maybe you should reconsider drinking on site and going to the pub, and maybe you should be more careful about how you act around people so you don't give them the wrong idea.
So it was your fault for leading them on?
Yes, it was my fault for getting drunk. I had 5 or 6 different incidents happen to me while on that site in under 2 years, and I only reported one of them. And when I did report that, they immediately found a way to make it my fault. And I knew that had I reported any of the other incidents that had happened, they would find a way to justify that man's behaviour with something that I had done.
That's why I've come forward. I'd like to see...
Like Rosanna, Astacia Stevens believes making men accountable for sexual assault and harassment in the mining industry is long overdue. Being able to finally come here and talk to people officially about what happened, is that daunting?
Definitely. Definitely.
Last year, she gave evidence to a WA parliamentary inquiry.
I have been sickened and disgusted. There has been some harrowing stories that just takes your breath away.
Your evidence is protected by parliamentary...
MP Libby Mettam is the chair of the committee, which has heard evidence from the mining companies, the regulator, and also confidential testimony from over 200 women.
I was not expecting what I heard. It's not until you hear individual evidence and individual cases and stories from people who've had their lives ruined just from going to work that you have some sense of the enormity.
Do you think there should be prosecutions as a result of this?
Well, absolutely. There are individuals, particularly those in senior positions, who have a lot to answer for.
Astacia and her husband Brent have now packed up their family and left mining altogether. She says the culture of sexual harassment is so endemic that she holds little hope of change.
You are a whistleblower, you'll never work in the industry again. I'll never work in this industry again.
Bronte Glass is still fighting for justice. She says she's paid a high price to be a fly-in, fly-out worker.
I wouldn't have been the first person this has happened to, Liam. Not in this industry. I've got nothing left to lose. You know, they've taken everything from me. Everything.
We asked the mining companies, Rio Tinto, Goldfields and Macca for interviews. They all said no.